Welcome to Plain Talk. Republicans have wrapped up their national convention in Milwaukee, and here to talk with us about it, by us I mean myself and guest host Corey Mock, who does listen to the show because he did catch the B Squad crack. I mean, the last episode.
Pretty quickly, too, actually.
Pretty quickly, yeah. Shortly after it was uploaded, Corey was like, B Squad?
I aspire for that. I mean, I'm still trying to qualify for like fourth JV squad at the public school. So B squad is high praise.
If we're being honest, I kind of feel like the coach's son. Like the only reason I'm hosting is it's my show. Otherwise, I would also not be B squad. Anyway, we're not going to talk about any of that. We're going to talk about somebody who was in the room in Milwaukee, U.S. House candidate and Public Service Commissioner Julie Fedorchak. Julie, how are you?
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. Good morning, Corey.
Good morning.
The now officially the Republican nominee for President Donald Trump gave his acceptance speech last night. It was a long one and a different tone for Trump. I guess. I mean, certainly after what happened recently, terrible. You would expect that, and he talked about that, and that was very interesting to hear. The rest of the speech, kind of the usual things we hear from him, although delivered in a different tone. What did you think of that speech last night?
Well, you could hear a pin drop when he was explaining that, when he was recapping the assassination attempt. And at one point, I thought he got choked up doing it just at the very beginning. And talking about the firefighter who lost his life. I mean, clearly you could see that weighed on Trump because he knows he was there for him. And now there's two kids who don't have a dad anymore. Yeah. And you could see it. You could see it. You could hear it. You could feel it, how that weighed on him. And, you can say what you want about Trump, but he is a devoted dad and a devoted grandpa. And he knows the burden that family bears now. And that was very, very just striking. I mean, I get choked up even thinking about that firefighter's uniform being on the stage. So, it was a powerful speech. It wasn't probably as long in the room as it felt on TV, I'm sure, because we could feel it was electric in that room. People were really hanging on almost every word that he was saying. And he was hitting on all the subjects that folks are really concerned about: the border, energy policy, crime in American cities, inflation and its impacts on families, jobs, international insecurity, all of these issues that are just at the forefront of everyday Americans' lives today. And what he wants to bring to bear on all of those issues, which are actually, quite honestly, just real common sense solutions I think people can relate to. So I loved the speech. I thought it was fabulous.
Julie, and I cannot imagine how solemn the occasion was as he was recapping the events from last Saturday. And anybody, I can only imagine when faced with your own mortality, and in that way, in such a graphic and traumatic way, I can only imagine. So thank you for even relaying just how the crowd took that information, and of course, I imagine it had a deep undertone to the whole convention. So it's just a tragedy. It's horrible. And yet could have been so much worse, and fortunate that it was as the damage was as limited as it was. So now I'm curious, leading up to his acceptance, former President Trump was giving this impression of having a new message, talking about unity, talking about how he was ripping up his old speech and starting from scratch and changing the tone. And as Rob had mentioned at the beginning, it started off different. But once we got past the recap of Saturday's events and got into some of the policy issues, we began to hear more of the say similar, say rhetoric. Were you or others in the delegation surprised that there wasn't more of a pivot in his overall message?
Well, I heard it differently, Corey. I felt that he reached out multiple times, and quite honestly, through the whole convention, it was a message of join us. We're for all Americans. We are the party that has solutions to bring people out of poverty, to create jobs, to protect families, to keep your communities safe, to return prosperity to the American people, to, eliminate tax on tips for the working class, really to reach out and join forces with the unions to help build infrastructure in this country, to help, turn the energy systems on again. Drill, baby, drill. That was probably the loudest. Applause of the whole night was when he talked about energy policy, which was, music to my ears and very notable to me, because people clearly understand the impact that energy policy has on them and on our country and on our world. And we have to get that back in the right direction. So I felt like it was very much a unifying, maybe not unifying with, we want to join forces with the Biden administration and move arms, lock arms together. That's not, I don't think, the kind of unity that is envisioned at this point. I think the unity that's envisioned is join us, join anybody who's independent, anybody who's on the fence, anybody who's frustrated with the current administration, join us and let's walk together and get this country back on track. I think that's the kind of unity that is dreamed of and was, I felt very much a part of President Trump's speech last night.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we talk about unity, I mean, there's never going to be consensus on public policy. That's democracy. In fact, I would be very afraid maybe if there was consensus, if we all just agreed with one another all the time. I'm not sure that's healthy, frankly. But there is, like, in terms of just some of the viciousness of the rhetoric. And I guess I'm thinking where, President Trump's message, he didn't talk about President Biden at all in his speech, which I thought was interesting, although at this point maybe he doesn't feel like he has to. I'm not sure that President Biden's going to be the candidate come November. So I don't know. That's a topic maybe for later in the podcast. But what really interested me is there's been a lot of effort on the trial. Certainly my inbox has been filled with people who are, all but blaming me for being complicit in the assassination, because I've been sharply critical of Donald Trump since he first, emerged as a presidential candidate. And I'm just wondering, like, how can that message be? J.D. Vance, days before he accepted the vice presidency nomination, was blaming Joe Biden for the assassination on social media, unambiguously. So how do you square that? I mean, how do Republicans say unity, join us, when the vice presidential candidate said something that was so blatantly unfair? I mean, whatever else you want to think about Joe Biden, he had nothing to do with the assassination, but J.D. Vance said he did. So how do we square these things?
Well, I haven't, quite honestly, I haven't seen those comments from Vance, so I can't speak to those in general. But I do think that in the, moments after the assassination attempt, and in the days since, when we're seeing, pretty obvious shortcomings from the Secret Service and blind spots, literal blind spots that were created. I think there's just frustration that it could happen. And so I'm not defending his comments, because quite honestly, I haven't seen them. But I think that there's going to be calls for, and there is calls, and rightfully so, calls for answers on the Social Service or Secret Service. And President Biden's, those are his agencies and his picks for leadership. So you have to take some responsibility for that.
Julie, do you get the vibe that people have a security concern? And you could answer that as a delegate or as an attendee to the convention, but we also have to look at your likely role as a member of Congress. And I know Secret Service is not the primary security force for Capitol. There's Capitol Police, Capitol Security, but to come that close and to have that gaping of a failure in a security procedure that has to put people on edge and get them thinking about their own sense of security. What was the sentiment? What was the vibe, the feeling of security there? And then for yourself and some others that are or may be members of Congress in the near future?
Well, the sense there, it felt very secure. I mean, there were so many sheriffs, police, highway patrol. They were on horseback. They were on bikes. They were in lining the streets. There was a pretty sizable hard perimeter around the first several blocks around the whole convention center, and then a softer perimeter out extended blocks beyond that. And so it felt very secure. I felt super safe there. And, as I was leaving last night, Marco Rubio walked right out in front of me, right out into the street. So that was kind of a little bit shocking to me that he and his wife just walked out like all the other convention delegates. I'm assuming maybe he had security around him, or once he got outside of the perimeter, maybe I hope he was getting into a secure vehicle. But I will say for myself, I feel just very much like, an average person, and I don't spend time thinking about the security myself. And I hope that is how I always am and feel. But I sat down with Steve Scalise, Leader Scalise, yesterday for a private meeting with him. And it kind of hits you then when you see somebody like that who was just going about his job and now has a, pretty sizable physical disability that he's going to be dealing with for a very long time, if not forever. And that was just in the, normal course of his service as a House of Representative member. So, yeah, it kind of strikes you at moments like that. But I look at it like there's pros and cons to public service. There's sacrifices, and that's one of them. And you have to be willing to face that.
And Julie, with the heat and the level of vitriol that we've heard, and it feels like there's just so much more of it going on. Is this a new reality that you think we're going to be facing to be on a higher level of threat or security? And if so, I mean, how is that sustainable? How do we maintain that level of security how can we keep that level of security that matches the tone, the rhetoric, again, that level of vitriol and divisiveness that we've been hearing from both sides? And R's, D's, left, right, you name it. I mean, it's clearly getting to a boiling point, and I'm concerned that more is going to have to give, and I'm hoping that we just see the temperatures come down and not have to live in a new heightened a world of heightened security. But where does this go?
Well, I'm a big believer in leadership by example, and so leaders do have to step up and start living the values. And I think that I can speak for myself. In my campaign, I worked very hard not to go over the top, not to criticize my opponents in the primary campaign, contrast my policy positions, but not go over the top on emotional language, emotionally charged language, etc. and really trying to focus on the policy positions. And I think that will be incumbent on our leaders to do that moving forward in this election. I think there's some simple things that you're going to see happening, I would expect, in this election, just in terms of security measures, probably fewer outside events. They were much harder to secure. And those are, there are some simple steps like that you can take to eliminate some of the X factors on these campaign events. And those are just have to be measures that the security demand. It is sad because it's harder to find venues, but I hope that's the case. And I did ask some of the Trump folks that I visited with how they're going to move forward, because you see all these threats from Iran, and basically it sounds like Iran is just desperate to take out Trump, and you can understand why they would be. But so how do you protect them in that? Well, moving indoors would be a big step, and I personally hope that that's one of the first measures that they do. So yeah, I think it's a big challenge. There's with AI and social media and technology and drones and all this new technology that it makes it harder to keep information private, to keep people's whereabouts private, and to control access. It is a big challenge, and it really speaks to the need for investments in this Secret Service, and them really stepping it up and making sure when they have the proper protocols for communication around a site, that if somebody is, gosh, you see that average citizens on the street attending that event were pointing to the guy on the roof with a gun. And that didn't get to or it got to it, or they ignored. I mean, it's sickening to think about what could have been prevented, and especially in terms of the life of the dad that was killed. It could have been prevented. It feels like it could have been prevented by just taking action and not bringing Trump out on stage until they knew what was going on with that guy on the roof that many had already seen. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done there, and just hope they can put some protocols in place quickly to secure the rest of this election, and then take a deep breath and step back. But meanwhile, it is incumbent on all of us to, focus on policy differences, not personality clashes.
Yeah, as a practitioner of the First Amendment for a living, who is also an appreciator of the art form of the polemic, my prose can be florid at times. I always struggle a little bit with this idea that being critical that's what, and it certainly, since the assassination attempt, I have dozens and dozens of emails, basically blaming me, like, you guys in the media did this. No, we didn't. Democracy is what it is, and I want a rough and tumble democracy. I don't want some of what we do, but that's just part of it. Anyway, let's move on a little bit. The party, one of the items on the agenda of any political party's national agenda is passing a platform. The Republican Party passed a platform, and Julie, one of the great disappointments in there, no mention at all of the national debt and deficit, which to me is one of the top issues in the country, if only because it touches on every other issue. How do we secure our border if we don't have the money? How do we continue to provide the benefits we're obligated to for people like, say, our veterans if we don't have the money? I was so disappointed that Republicans took that out of the platform. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm disappointed by that too, and I will just say that that is baked into all of the discussions that I'm hearing already on House leadership, and they're working with Senate leadership, and they're working with President Trump already. And you heard President Trump talk about it last night in his speech, that we need to and will be addressing the deficit in the first 100 days, along with tax reform, along with regulatory reform, border security. Those are going to be the top priorities. And what I'm most excited about is about 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, I was in DC. I was in a small meeting with Speaker Johnson. I met yesterday with Leader Scalise. I have spent a lot of time with our congressional delegation over the last couple of days. And there are plans underway already that in the case that the Republicans gain control of the House and the Senate and the presidency, there isn't going to be a moment wasted. They're already working on what the agenda is going to look like. And budget and deficit are very high on that list, along with border security, along with energy security and energy development. And those aren't all mutually exclusive either. You can kill a couple birds with one stone. Like if you're unleashing American energy and developing more American energy and allowing drilling on federal lands and growing the economy through energy development, that's going to increase revenue. So that helps with the budget. So that's, works in two ways. You've also got to have spending cuts. Well, maybe you help employ the energy industry by rolling back some of the regulations and getting rid of some of the people in the agencies. That saves money. So, I think that there's going to be a very aggressive 100-day plan for the start of that first session, should we have a majority in the House, Senate, and the presidency.
Well, I don't know, Rob, if you wanted to follow up, but I mean, I look at I hear some of those ideas. I mean, those are drops in the bucket of the federal budget. I mean, we're talking trillions, and I don't think we can get to serious reforms and control of our deficit and the ballooning budget by just making some small agency reforms and cutting a few FTEs in some of these federal agencies. I mean, I think we're going to have to see much broader wholesale reforms in order to really turn this ship around. Is there more that a Republican majority has on its list than just making government more efficient?
I don't think what I just outlined is just simply trimming around the edges. I mean, there were massive numbers of people added to some of these federal agencies, Corey. I look at the IRS, look at the EPA, the onslaught of regulations coming out of those agencies, labor, is sizable. And so, yes, you can have significant changes in that. You can have, there was a lot of new spending created by IIJA, IRA. There's opportunity for rolling back some of those things. There's a lot of growth that can happen by being intentional about creating in short order, creating a pro-business legal, tax, and regulatory climate in our country. We've done that in North Dakota. We can do that in America. And I think you're going to see Republicans moving aggressively in that way immediately. And of course, some of the issues require longer term reform. And those won't happen in the first 100 days, but you're going to see people, sprinting from the blocks on the get-go, not slow and steady start.
Well, Julie,
that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, and we can't get into this. We have no time. So I'm not even going to bring it up. I was going to bring up Medicare and Medicaid. I mean, these are enormous programs, and the spending on them is one of the primary drivers of our national debt. And I don't know how we get serious at all without putting programs like that on the table. Not necessarily for cuts, but we got to do something. I mean, something's got to happen, but we're out of time, and we have another interview right after this, so we got to move on. Julie, thank you so much for your time, and travel safe home from Milwaukee.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation. Have a great weekend, you both.
The cold cases you see at The Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At The Vault Podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
Welcome back. Just finished up our interview with U.S. House candidate Julie Fedorchak, who attended the obviously the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Now we're going to switch gears. We're going to come back a lot more locally. You've probably read headlines out of the western part of the state, Dickinson State University, the president of Dickinson State University abruptly resigning. That's Steve Easton, and did so amid a dispute with the nursing faculty who, prior to him resigning, they had all resigned. So it's a very interesting situation. We have as our guest now Chancellor Mark Hagerott, who I know has been over in Dickinson, addressing this situation, part of which is obviously who's going to lead the university going forward and what is the university going to be doing about its nursing program. And Mark, first of all, welcome to the program. How are you?
Well, thanks again for having me.
Definitely. Yeah, you were just on not that long ago, but didn't anticipate this coming up, but here we are. I know you've been over in Dickinson. Tell us, how has that been going? Give us an update. Where are we at?
Yeah, it's a wonderful place. If people have not been out there, I know you have this image of Western North Dakota, not you, because I know you're in Western North Dakota too, of, this high plains, but, it's a beautiful, for your listeners, it's a beautiful campus up on a ridge with pine trees that were planted probably 100 years ago. So, only a few miles from Medora where, the Presidential Museum Library is coming in, and, a wonderful downtown built by the railroads, Ballard. I'm a historian. So I just want to situate people that it's not just some obscure little college out there. It's a wonderful place, and had meetings with the faculty, the staff, foundation leadership, legislators, and all were constructive meetings. And the focus is, the students are coming back in 5 weeks, right? And 7 faculty did resign, but that's 7 out of about 165 faculty and staff, thousands of students. So I just want to be sure your listeners understand 7 people out of that group didn't sign their contracts, and all of the faculty and staff are moving to this credit hour production requirement, because it's how our state runs. I spend quite a bit of time with the faculty explaining how the funding formula works, how we're a performance-driven system, one of the most performance-driven in the country. Some states still have just block grants. You have a powerful legislature, you get a block grant, right? But Governor Dalrymple fixed that, years ago. And if he ever listens to these programs, I want to thank him. It was very visionary that you earn what you teach. And the other thing is, I explained to him that each campus has its own credit rating. North Dakota has a AAA plus credit rating, but each of these campuses have to manage what's called their CFI, Composite Financial Index, and their credit rating. And I think a lot of faculty didn't quite understand that President Easton is accountable for all of that. And the Department of Education looks at those numbers in excruciating detail. And so I think that might have helped them put this in perspective of, 7 faculty did not sign their contracts, but everybody else is moving forward. So I just want to be sure that's out front.
Chancellor, I understand that in the grand scheme of the campus, it's a relatively small number of faculty members, but my understanding is that not the entire program? That's the entire nursing staff, correct?
Correct. And I just, be upfront. I have the highest admiration for nurses. My great-grandmother was a nurse. My grandmother was a nurse. My mom was the student body president at St. Alexis Nursing School, which then became Mary the day the graduation ended back in 1959, I think it was. My daughter's a nurse. My sister's a nurse. So I have the highest admiration, but they were taking a labor action. And basically, President Easton is trying to get productivity levels across the school so that you're not having other schools and other students subsidizing them, and I'm not sure all the nurses understood that we're really asking other people to subsidize our program. And that's the root of what was going on, is trying to get Dickinson, and I'll just tell you, all the colleges are doing it. I don't know if you've interviewed Dr. Cook yet, but he's after 10 years of lack of adaptation on the level of employment there, he's going through some very difficult times of consolidating several colleges and reducing even tenured faculty. So that's what I also explained to Dickinson, that this oddly got in the news, whereas a lot of this has happened. Rob, you've covered, there's some stuff with Mayville before and Fargo, but this one somehow really got in the news. But it's 7 faculty out of the whole institution not signing their contracts, and they're working through it as we speak.
What I actually just met with President Cook this week. He came through Minot, and we sat down and talked for a little bit. And certainly this is something that higher ed is in transition, and we've known this for years. Where how the consumers of higher education, the way they're going about it's changing, and the institutions have to change to adapt. Anyway, one of the most interesting things when I was reading President Easton's and he's still currently acting president.
He has not signed his formal resignation letter, but clearly he's a man of his word. I mean, you're talking about.
Is there a chance he could stay? I mean, is there a chance he could stay on?
No, he will not stay. It's just, but I'm just saying, I just want listeners to listen. This is a North Dakota kid who went to a community college, who then, and that's one of the issues I just share with you. Please put that on the shelf, that some people in Dickinson do not want to serve community college students, which is a big issue we need to come back to. He went to a community college. People identified his talent. He then went to Dickinson, four generations. So this is a man who loves this campus. He was just brilliant, and then went to Stanford Law. I saw when I was at his office the books this man has published. He's the co-author of the most used textbook in the Western United States on trial laws. I mean, he's a former U.S. attorney. I mean, he was an assassination target himself. You can read the guy had him on a list, and they killed a judge in Grand Forks, and he was driving to Dickinson to get Steve Easton, right? Or to Bismarck. Then he became the dean of the law school at Wyoming, and he gave up all that to come back to help his alma mater. So for all the mudslinging that was happening, I want people to know that's the type of guy we had. And by the way, there's been some rumoring, thank you for doing this show, the chancellor of the board got tired of him. Absolutely not. The board all expressed support for him. I did, because he's doing transformative work. And I make one last point. This model he's building, this what's called dual mission. You take care of the tech and trades. You take care of master's degree students who want to be Theodore Roosevelt scholars. That's becoming a national movement. And his work has been recognized, at the national level of what he's doing. So I just want people to understand that. And his resignation was coming anyway, just to share with you. He allowed me to share this, but he's older than I am. You can Google it, and he's well past retirement age. And so I think this event just accelerated it for him. So I just want people to be sure they understand.
That's important context. One of the things that he wrote in his resignation, I'm going to quote here. Before the recent resignations, DSU had 7 full-time nursing faculty members. In our last graduating class 2 months ago, we produced 16 students eligible to take the registered nurse exam. The simple reality is that though we love DSU nursing and want to help it survive, we cannot spend over $500,000 in compensation expenses for 16 registered nurses. That does not work financially. Now, I read that. I'm like, yeah, obviously that doesn't work. Those numbers are all accurate. That's a accurate accounting of the situation.
Oh, this man's also, I forgot to mention, he's a CPA. He's incredible. When he took over, just to share with you, your listeners will like this. We hired him, I think, the day President Trump grounded all the airlines out of the United States. Remember, those were epic days. I mean, like, how does a world economy work when the airlines? And he's sitting next to me, and the board's about to vote. And he looked at me and goes, I'm going to give up a lifetime tenure job at Wyoming and come back here to help a struggling college restructure in a new model on the day a pandemic's happening. Is that a wise thing? I said, Steve, you got to do it. And he took the contract. So, so when he came in, and we appreciate his predecessor, but the predecessor had just, had been overwhelmed by the complexity of this restructuring. And Steve came out to my farm. I've got a small farm west of Mandan. The Hagerott's been in Morton County since 1885, but I got my own. And we sat on the end of my truck, chomping on a taco. And he pulls out this binder like this. And he had every program. And he had the bottom line. And he had how much money. I mean, this guy is a CPA and a lawyer. And so, yes, his facts are correct. And if he ever has one in error, he'll immediately admit it and go back and get the number corrected. So, yeah, that's the reality.
So the situation was, I think, for President Easton's perspective, is that we're spending too much money on a program that is producing a relatively small number of students or graduates, I guess, every cycle. So what is it exactly that was offered to the nurses that's a change? Can you help the listeners understand what were they being asked to agree to that they
and the other thing I would just say is when they took this labor action, right? I mean, and again, I got to, parenthetically say my mom is still going and she listens to your podcast sometimes. So, Mom, I love nurses. Okay. But they took a labor action strategically getting close to the end of the summer, right? So look at that, okay? I can report this, that the President Easton extracted himself from the negotiations to try to de-energize. It was still getting very tense, and then he decided to resign. Okay, this was a precipitating event. I hope people understand. These 7 people doing this action have now caused a chain of events, which include an acting president, interim president, a search, 5 weeks before the students come back. But we'll get through all that, okay? I mean, we'll get through it. It's a resilient organization. But they did not want to, and you should interview them because they're the experts, right? But basically, he wanted higher productivity metrics, which they believed, to be fair, in case Mom's listening, that how they do clinicals and how they account for stuff, they couldn't believe they could do a quality product with that. So President Easton said, okay, then we won't. Basically, he conceded through his vice president. And as far as I understand, the director had to sign the contract first. She refused to sign it. So, I mean, he's already offered the olive branch. And so that's as far as I can go because he's still the president. We have complete confidence in all of them. They're doing all the negotiating. But I know that much, that he said, okay, for the sake of the students, I will resign early. I will get out of here if I'm causing the trouble. And we will go back to the original thing. And from what I understand, the key person had to hire back, the director first, then hire the other ones, did not accept that. They wanted something else. So, it's still going on, but it was a really, I think, disappointing sequence of events. We'll leave it at that.
So they were offered their old contract again, not the new contract, but the old contract again, and they've refused even to work under their old contract.
Well, it got even more complicated. There's a body, I don't want to use the name of it, but there's an external body that asserted itself in this whole thing and restricted his ability, quite frankly, and I said this in the Active Student Affairs, I mean, they materially undermined the accountable officer, which is the president, to take care of his duties, which are the health, the safety, welfare, education, financial condition of an institution. And as a former nuclear engineer, you never do that to the person who's accountable for the reactor, come in and take away their ability to do their job. And then, we have a problem with the reactor. Oh, well, that's his problem. Well, they materially affected his ability to negotiate with these people. And I hope that's addressed later, at pay grades above me. But Steve is still, President Easton is still there. They're negotiating. This is what he briefed me, and that's why we did not insert ourselves, the state board or myself. They are running their school. We are now focused on the process of his retirement and acting a interim, that transition. That's what I and the board are working on now.
Chancellor, how many students are still in the program at DSU? Are we... with the numbers that have graduated, what's the current status of the program?
You'd have to ask them specifically, but I think it's about 100. And to the credit, the students are out there. The summer students, they're just wonderful people. And that's what I said to the faculty. Don't pull them into this situation, right? They're just wonderful students. There's one student that helped me get to the meeting room and it had on her sweater, she's a Montana student, be kind, I think is what she had, and that's what I said to them. You have this great opportunity. You're at a college campus. Many of you have jobs for life. You have these wonderful students. You have a little scuffle over a contract language. just work through it. As a former naval officer, I have former officers I mentored who are out at sea going on 11 months trying to keep the oil lanes open, right? Just work with this in perspective, right? And so the students, to my understanding, are having a lot of perspective, and there hasn't been a mass disenrollment. There might be one or two here or there. But right now, the news is there's a contract negotiation going on. A president who is well past retirement age, who's done a wonderful job, is retiring, and there's no reason not to come back and be here in the fall. So,
well, how long can students sit on ice waiting for a resolution when you've got 5 weeks before the semester begins? And if you're in the middle of your program of study, and you need to transfer, there are deadlines, there's fees, not to mention the physical relocation to another college town.
Yeah. Well, I just want to let you know that if for some reason these faculty members, they've already, through their former director, from what I understand, rejected going back to the original. So I don't know what else they want. Again, President Easton and his staff are negotiating. But we do have a unified system, and I want to just thank, I think just about every college in their nursing program, it said we are certainly willing to try to make room and help them out. So if any of them are listening, they will be taken care of one way or the other. We're a big enough system that we're not going to be held hostage by seven contract disputed employees, for the sake of the students.
Does that include assistance with students if they have to physically relocate? Are we looking at scholarships to offset some of those costs? I mean, what is our capacity to help keep those students whole while this dispute is ongoing?
There was a legislator, not to be named, but he gave me a call and he said, you know what, if we have to, we'll find some scholarship money to take care of these. So I really want to thank him. His wife is a nursing administrator, so he understands how important these students are. So between the legislative support, the governor's office very supportive, they will all be taken care of. It's just regrettable that 7 employees would dispute this and not say, let's work this out over time. But to take this action this late, in the summer is disappointing.
When were they first offered this new contract that I guess was the genesis for the dispute? I mean, when did that first come? Was it?
I'd have to get back to you, but weeks ago, probably maybe months ago, because from what I understand, 90% of all the rest of the faculty, or 95%, tenured faculty signed their contracts. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but over 90% had already signed. So these were the last ones, basically.
And then I think you were referencing, I mean, it seems the Board of Nursing, or I'm probably not getting their name right, but it's essentially the licensing agency for the state of North Dakota. It's a board. When I was reading, President Easton's statement, he's saying that they interfered or they injected themselves into this. Can you characterize that? What was going on there?
Yeah, and again, he's the expert at this. I mean, the paper trail is like that. Okay, email. I mean, it's just like, you have a former law school dean who keeps track of all these things. But as what I understand it is, he's in these contract negotiations. He's trying to, as you point out, make the department fiscally sound and not having other students subsidize them, right? That's what you understand. Other people would have to subsidize them. So somebody's tuition money, someone's taxpayer money is flowing to these 7 faculty who, these were not unreasonable proposals, right? And again, from what I understand, President Easton then said, go back to the original proposal, and their director still did not sign, which meant they wanted something more. But anyway, the Board of Nursing, which we appreciate, we need them to maintain standards and make sure we're getting, people who take care of us correctly, would, by President Easton's perspective, have exceeded their authority by basically, when he was in negotiations, he said, well, if they're not going to teach, I've got to take care of these students, just like, for listeners, Corey Mock is Corey, but he's also representative, taking care of our people. That's why we're here. He said, I've got to be able to take care of these students. If this grinds out, I've got to be able to reach out to the other colleges. A lot of them have great online programs. You could have, people come in to do the hands-on stuff for the hospitals. And from what I understand, but you should, talk to him. They said, you can't talk to anybody else. And that's what I was saying. They materially restricted his ability to respond to a crucial.
I don't understand that he can't talk. So he can't talk to other faculty, like other people.
Right.
Potentially come
they
in and serve as
basically
faculty.
said you can only talk to these, which would seem to be a regulatory body taking sides and saying you can only talk to these 7 people who are in a labor dispute. And he's a pretty savvy Stanford lawyer. It's like, wow, that's way exceeding their authority, because they have no accountability for what happens, right? If those 100 student nurses didn't come back and it destabilized, the financials of Dickinson, where are they? What money can they provide him to subsidize him, right? And so again, he's the expert on it, but that's how I understand it. Now, I do understand, I think they later realized they overstepped, and to their credit, from what I understand, but you have to talk to them, they did clarify saying, well, no, of course, several days later, they said, yes, you can talk to other people. So I think they realized they had gone too far. We all make mistakes. And so, they did correct it eventually, but it caused a loss of several days of negotiating this and avoiding it getting to be, a very, distracting news story. So.
Chancellor, I guess I'm still trying to reconcile all the moving parts here, but maybe we even just set that aside. How are we able to firewall this issue to just Dickinson State when you're talking about an external body, if the Board of Nurses or the Nurses Association, if they're intervening and it's a labor dispute? Help me understand why this is isolated to just DSU, and what are we doing to make sure that this doesn't become an issue at other campuses?
Oh, that's a great question. You can tell we have a lawmaker here, Corey. Okay. Rob, you've got a lawmaker on the show. Yeah, you're exactly right. I've had some people contact me from other colleges going, this would be precedent setting. That you have reasonable people disagree on something, and all of a sudden they bring in allies from the outside that can give an order, which again, they rescinded, as I understand it. But still, it threw things off. I mean, I spent all weekend on the phone with Dickinson area legislators trying to explain what was going on with the president, with the governor's office, my board chair and vice chair, because it all of a sudden made a crisis. Because, again, as I said, the president no longer had the tools to run his campus. And to their credit, I think by Tuesday they pulled back and said, well, yeah, you can, of course, run your campus and talk. But you're right, Representative Mock, Corey. Other campuses said, if, and again, President Easton's resigning for his retirement, it accelerated. But some people were spinning this that, these faculty and the Board of Nursing got rid of a president who didn't toe the line. And they're saying, if that becomes the norm, who can negotiate with any faculty department without the idea that you get external factors coming in? And, presidents are very vulnerable in this day and age. And that's why I was complimenting Rob. He tries so hard to be accurate and supporting, but other people will take half-truths and snippets and put this out and damage these presidents who then are unemployable, right? And that's why having outside entities that have no accountability for these institutions weighing in like this is problematic. So you're right, Corey, that's an issue, and that's why hopefully this gets resolved and the board pulls back a little bit in future interactions on labor issues.
Is there, one thing that I'm looking at this, and we've got to remember the context here. North Dakota has had, and I don't think that we're necessarily unique in this way in the nation, but we have a nursing shortage. It's been a chronic one for a long time. I know Corey could talk about, the legislature's been talking about this for a long time. How do we fix this problem? How worried do we need to be that the end result of all this is just the end of the nursing program in Dickinson, where there's just the university just says, we can't do this. These students are going to have to go to other programs because we can't find a way to run this in a way, that's not going to put a burden on students who aren't nursing students. Because that's the other thing too, is the affordability of higher education. We talk about that all the time. Is it fair for somebody who's going to Dickinson State University to get a different sort of degree, also subsidizing the students in the nursing program? I don't know. But I mean, I know that's tough, and I overall, I think we all want to be, not allowing tuition to grow in some of the ways it's grown in the past. So what are the odds that we're just going to end up with no nursing program at DSU?
No, that won't happen. Just our system, if I can toot the horn for North Dakota, there's a national report that came out, and North Dakota's higher education system is ranked, I think, number 8 in the country. Very innovative. We have some of the best transfer agreements between the campuses. We've created a couple of collaborative entities, and one of them, one's around IT, the Dakota Digital Academy, to help share computer science courses, which could be low enrollment, but we need them everywhere. We don't want rural people not having the skills of this new economy. So we share. The other one is a thing called the Dakota Nursing Program, very innovative, that several campuses share their instructors, their programs, and so there will be a nursing program in Dickinson. Maybe they have to integrate into the Dakota Nursing Program and share courses with the other participants, Lake Region, Bismarck, Botno, I forget the other one. So there's lots of alternatives through a system like this, which is one benefit of having one state board, one chancellor, because if they don't collaborate, then we put in their evaluation, like, why weren't you collaborating and helping these other colleges, right? That's one advantage of a single system. So no, I want to assure people there will be nursing program in Dickinson. Dickinson is so important, if I can share with you. The Chronicle of Higher Ed came out several years ago saying, rural distances can be really problematic for students. And Southwest North Dakota, Eastern Montana was the number 4th most stressed higher education area in the nation. They called it Education Desert because you had to drive 200 miles round trip to get welding classes and tech and trades. That's partly why we made Dickinson into what's called dual mission. They're both community college and they're 4-year school. So Dickinson needs to be there. It anchors Southwest North Dakota, Eastern Montana. And again, this young lady who had this wonderful shirt was from Eastern Montana. I got there early and I needed to get a haircut because I knew I was coming on your show. I better get a haircut. The barber was
it's an audio medium, Chance. So
I got all dressed up for you. Anyway, he was from Eastern Montana. He goes, I love North Dakota, right? He says Montana's overrun with movie stars. He says, and he'd gone to Dickinson and ran track. So here we have people moving into Southwest North Dakota, and we're not even talking about the presidential library coming in. So Dickinson's a crucial part of the system. I was at a national conference. I came back early, and they were talking about the crisis in some of these states. I don't want to name them, but their enrollment's down 30%. And they have so many colleges there because, they were settled earlier. And by the way, we were one of the first to turn our numbers after COVID. And over a 10-year period, they were down 30, we're down 7%. And half of that is from one of our research institutions, that should have been growing during that period. So we're doing remarkably well as a system. We'll help Dickinson if they can't find a way to get those 7 contract signed. It'll continue on, just to assure your listeners.
Well, Chancellor, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. We gave us a half hour and we took every minute of it and then a little. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. And Representative Mark, we'll miss you in the legislature. You're the IT guy we were counting on. You need to get a relief for that. So
send me an IM and we'll help you out anytime.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
Well, that was an interview with Chancellor Mark Hagerott. Certainly an interesting situation in Dickinson. He really characterized it as a labor dispute, and I don't know that that's something that's really come through in a lot of the coverage, but there's a nursing association here that is essentially functioning like a labor union, and they're rejecting a contract, and then they all resigned, and then you could kind of look at that maybe almost as like going on strike. In a way,
that's how I'm interpreting this from the interview.
Yeah, well, all of that, like those laborers, they're very circumscribed by law, And so terms like strike and all that have a very specific situation. So maybe it's not a strike under the legal definition, but what, in terms of us just discussing it, that's kind of what happened. They didn't like their contract. They said, all right, we're not going to work anymore. And I don't know. I kind of look at it. It seems like sort of a very difficult situation, because on one hand, I don't doubt the financial realities. I mean, they're spending a lot of money on a program that's not graduating a lot of students. That doesn't mean the program's unimportant, but it does probably mean there needs to be some reform. On the other hand, the people who teach the program don't want to work, apparently even under the contract they were working on, according to what the chancellor just told us. So how do you fix that problem? I don't know. Hopefully there is a fix, because I don't want the nursing program to go away.
I still don't know how this doesn't become a larger issue at other campuses.
Well, I mean, based on some of the things that I have seen, on social media. I mean, one of my daughters sent me a TikTok that somebody did about this situation in Dickinson State. I mean, they've really pushed it out there. I wouldn't doubt that this essentially this labor union is probably they want this to spread, right? They want this to go other places.
Right. What do you do if you're one of the students? How long do you wait? It's the day where we are recording this on Friday, July 19th. And, classes, according to the Dickinson Press article, classes at DSU, they begin Monday, the 26th of August. I mean, you are 5 weeks.
Yeah.
How long do you wait? Your career, your education, all of that is just left in limbo. And I don't think that much has changed since I was part of the university system when I was a student, but it's a process to register, to transfer. I mean, that it's not a just go in there and click and you're done. I mean, there are deadlines, there's fees, there's so much that goes into this.
And a lot of these students probably aren't from Dickinson, right? I mean,
right.
It's not at all unusual that people would travel from other parts of the state or even other parts of the country to go there. So suddenly, if you're thinking, well, the future of this program's uncertain, I mean, attending in a different city could mean thousands of dollars in additional expenses when you start thinking, okay, well, now I've got to rent an apartment there instead of here, or now I have to find a part-time job there instead of here. I have to travel there instead of here. I have to enroll there. I have to go through the process of becoming and being accepted as a student in this different program. Now, it does sound like the legislature, or at least and it's always, one lawmaker being okay with making some money available for scholarships doesn't mean the whole legislature is going to be okay with it, or whatever key committee might be able to sign off on that in the interim. But I mean, it doesn't. We do have nursing programs at the school, so maybe there's something they can do with remote education, where maybe the students are on campus at DSU, but you have faculty at another campus providing the instruction and maybe traveling there if there's hands-on stuff that needs to be done. It does make me feel good that they're going to find a way to accommodate this, but it does. I mean, they're not on this timeline is not salubrious for anyone, I think, right now.
No, it's not. And let's even take this a layer up. Let's take a step back. Solving the nursing program issue. Who do you get to come into Dickinson and take over the president's role? Who wants to walk in, and with the long history that Dickinson State has had, it's had challenges.
I mean, that's been a tough gig since the diploma mill scandal,
right?
However many years ago that was.
I mean, talk about walking in to a hornet's nest. I mean, President Easton is on his way out. You're going to have an interim position. Can you find someone who's willing to sit in that office within 2 weeks? I mean, what do you have to offer someone in order to take ownership of this issue, let alone whatever might be coming down?
Well, and I don't know that all the faculty or their supporters feel this way, but certainly some of them do, where they feel like, hey, victory. We drove the guy away. He's gone now. or is going to be. Although he's still negotiating the contract, so is he really gone? I guess I don't know, but I mean, they were feeling a sense of jubilance. If that becomes the thing where if we don't like our contract, we could just make the president go away. Boy, that's a tough situation that we're in. And again, we've all seen presidents move through for various reasons and end up, out on their ear for one reason or the other. It's a very difficult situation. I hope they find a resolution to this, but we need nurses. But we also need higher ed to not cost as much as it does. We need to be able to deliver it in a cost-effective way.
I wonder what next session brings as far as serious reform. When you look at on one hand, the duplication of services, but on the other hand, you need to have access to programs. You've got labor and workforce shortages. It's not an easy issue, and this isn't something that can just be solved by moving a few pieces around. It is costly, and unfortunately, we're setting it up where the solution is more money either coming from the state to offset these costs, or you're looking at higher tuition, higher fees. Or cutting programs, and that doesn't. There is no good solution that I can see from this, and that doesn't even take into account the ego, the pride of ownership, the locality. You've got nobody wants to lose a program in their community because of what that means to the community. Nobody wants to see. In fact, if anything, you're looking to see growth, to see expansion, So, you've got 141 legislators, and every single one of them has a bias to some degree. I don't know.
Well, you think about it too. You're talking about. I think the program graduated. According to President Easton's statement, 16 registered
16?
nurses. But I think overall in the whole program, I think there's like 100 students enrolled in the whole program. That's a not small. When you consider that the DSU's total enrollment's a couple of thousand, that's a not small. And that's 100 or so fewer people maybe in Dickinson who are going to be, doing, all those other things that we're not supposed to care about, but, generating the commerce. It's a hit. The nurses are probably in a unique, if you're thinking about faculty, a lot of these universities, the nursing faculty are probably in a unique situation because theirs is, again, the reason why we're all concerned about nursing programs is because there's a nursing shortage. And this nursing faculty, if they don't like their contract, they could go be nurses, right? And it's hugely in demand. And our ability to find new nurses or people who are qualified to teach in a nursing program is going to be limited by the fact that nurses are so hugely in demand, unlike, say, in all due respect to our philosophy professors, there's just not the same level of demand for them as there is for nurses. So,
are you trying to say that that our society has a greater need for the medical professionals?
I appreciate philosophy professors. I think studying philosophy is huge. And I'm not being facetious here. I think it's very, very important. But they're just not in the same level of demand that nurses are. They're just not.
You're breaking a lot of undergrads' hearts right now that are wanting to go into the liberal arts programs and finding out that the career prospects aren't there.
Listen, I think it's great if you could quote Kierkegaard and talk to me about Plato and everything else. I don't know. You're going to need some other skills in the job market.
Maybe take a couple tech courses, learn welding on the side.
By the way, I'm not a proponent of either or. I think nurses should learn philosophy. I think welders should learn literature. Right?
Right.
There's a point to this.
All kidding aside, I agree, and it's The other thing, and we never even got into this. I believe it was at one of the more recent workforce committee meetings. There was a proposal that came through to expand the Train ND from the 4 campuses or the 4 programs to 6. And that's a proposal coming from the university system office. So you're adding, I believe it was to add Botno or Minot as one of to give them a hub, and then Dickinson. The other train ND directors were not on board with this proposal, and that's one more element that Dickinson is looped into.
I mean, the university, it's complex because there's always parochialism, right? There's always, we want the program in our community and not that community, and we don't want to compete, and there is a lot of duplication in these at our universities, and it is, I would argue, and this is a third rail that nobody wants to touch, but sometimes we really do have too many institutions. And I do feel like if we really wanted to get cost effective about delivering higher ed, we could probably cut down on some of our brick and mortar campuses and do some consolidation. Now, nobody wants to talk about that, but that's a reality. That's a real thing.
We hear it a lot. It's in the Constitution. We can't get rid of them. We can't change it. The Constitution
we could get rid of them. The problem is you got to get the public on board. And a lot of the people in the public don't want, if you're afraid that your campus might be one of the ones on the chopping block, you don't want to lose those couple of thousand students coming to your community, or maybe more, depending on which institution we're talking about. You don't want to lose that, them coming and filling part-time jobs, generating commerce, eating in restaurants, all the things that the students do to make people money. They want to lose it. But
no, you're exactly right. It's and I feel like when we talk about this, it's helpful to remind everybody. So that not everyone has to go on and look it up themselves. There are 11 public campuses. 8 of them are listed in the Constitution.
Is it 8 or 9?
8.
8. Okay.
I went through and in fact, I was curious on this a little bit ago and went and looked them up. I mean, you've got Grand Forks, Fargo, and then College of Science in Wahpeton. The 4, as it states in the Constitution, normal schools and teacher colleges are Valley City, Mayville, Minot, Dickinson, and then the School of Forestry at Bottineau. The 3 that are not listed, there's a provision for any others that are created by the Board of Higher Ed or University System: Williston, Devils Lake, and Bismarck. Yeah. Those are the 3 that are not specifically listed in the Constitution.
And by the way, Jamestown, not a public institution. People make that mistake all the time.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, Jamestown University is a private university, and then tribal colleges are their own entities. So yes, you get into these are the 11 public institutions
that make up the North Dakota University System. So anyway, that's an interesting situation. We'll see how that unfolds. We should talk a little bit too about Julie Fedorchak's comments. And I will tell you that after the assassination, I have all the empathy in the world for President Trump and his family and all the people who love him, to watch him go through that. I hate that it happened. Assassinations are fundamentally undemocratic. We're trying to rob the voters of a choice. It's disgusting. I don't like it. That being said, I'm having a hard time being lectured about civility by Trump supporters right now. I'm really struggling with that. It's a difficult thing. And I'm trouble. We want to change the tone, but J.D. Vance is out there blaming President Biden for the assassination attempt. I think it's one thing to disagree. I stand by everything I've ever written about Donald Trump. I believe it. I've been critical of him. But I've never wished the man ill. I've never encouraged violence. I have been consistently against violent political demonstrations, whether we're talking about the Dakota Access Pipeline protests or some of the Black Lives Matter, not all the Black Lives Matter protests, but the ones that got out of control, or we're talking about January 6th where they attacked the Congress. I'm against it. That being said, it seems like our violent rhetoric is okay, but theirs is wrong.
That was the single greatest disappointment that I heard coming from last Saturday's events. And to be fair, it didn't come from everybody, but to hear some leaders say, absolutely, tone it down, cool it down, it's their fault. They started, or they're doing it. They're the problem. And in some people's case, they were even stating that I'm not going to calm down my language because look at what they're saying. It's very difficult to have even a civil conversation about the lack of civility when you can't take accountability for your own words, for your own actions.
And we're not nitpicking, right? We have a tendency to try to define our opponents by their most extreme elements, right? Throughout history, even on some of our most pacific political eras, Republicans, Democrats, every political movement has some fringe characters who say things that, and I think sometimes it's a shoddy tactic to pick a couple people on the fringe and then try to define an entire movement by them. I think, I don't think we're doing it. Marjorie Taylor Greene blamed the assassination attempt on Joe Biden. She spoke from the stage at the RNC. J.D. Vance blamed it on Biden. He got nominated as vice president. Tucker Carlson blamed it on Biden. He spoke from the stage at the RNC. These are not fringe characters. As much as I might like them to be, they're not.
They've become mainstream. They become part of the standard dialogue within the RNC and or the Republican Party, and it's just disappointing. And I'm again, Democrats have their rhetoric. There's no shortage of vitriol from either side. I don't know that we'll ever really know what this guy's motivations were. It's always disappointing when you hear the conclusions that people come to as soon as something occurs. You know, this one guy who was trying to take the life of former President Trump, he must have been a Democrat, must have been this, it's Biden's fault, whatever. We don't know. And there's really going to be no justification, none whatsoever. It's evil is evil. That is just out of bounds. But by sitting here jumping to those conclusions, by even suggesting that the other side had any involvement or responsibility is not helping with the dialogue. And can we just all come back and say, this guy is sick? What he did was wrong? Nobody should be doing this. And if you're out there thinking that you're going to be solving any problems by trying violence in our name, you are dead wrong. Stop right now, because
I don't want to. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt your point.
No.
But I mean, I don't have a problem with tough rhetoric sometimes. Again, we live in a democracy. I am certainly again, I'm not shy about throwing some elbows. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is when we've concluded that the other side is not just wrong, but evil. And that is a universal problem in American politics right now, where, I mean, you hear the way, I was listening to, I'm not a J.D. Vance fan at all. If he's the future of the Republican Party, I'm not sure that's a party that has a place for me in it. That being said, when I'm hearing Rachel Maddow suggest that the Tolkien, there's been this thing right now where like J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and so they've named some of their companies that they've started after names or characters from Tolkien books, and she's suggesting that this is like white supremacy and everything else like that. That is such a stupid stretch. And of all the pertinent criticisms that you could make of somebody like J.D. Vance, to go to that just is dumb. Like, it's dumb. But yet Rachel Maddow's a huge thought leader on the left. What are you doing? Stop it. And we can go down the list of all the stupid things that Fox News hosts have said about Joe Biden. Stop it. This is not helpful. And I think that's the problem is I don't agree with Democrat. Corey, your time in the legislature, I have disagreed with you most of the time on policy. That's just reality. I don't think you're bad. I mean, obviously, I have you on the podcast. We're friends. I don't think you're a bad person. But if you and I were sitting down and designing the tax code, we'd come up with some very different ideas.
We probably would.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
That doesn't make either of us evil or bad.
No. What makes you evil is being a Yankees fan.
Oh,
no, right. Okay. All right. That was
podcast over. You're down to C squad now, my friend.
I want to make sure that I remain relegated to B squad or lower.
I can't believe
no, you are exactly.
I am so offended right now. You are canceled, sir.
Yeah, it's good to know that there is a line, by the way, that you can cross to make Rob angry. The person with the thickest skin in North Dakota politics. Once you touch the Yankees, all bets are off.
I'm laughing while I say this stuff. Listen, when you're a Yankees fan, you welcome the hate, right? Like
it says that you're doing well.
It comes with the territory.
Yeah. No one ever you don't hear anyone picking on
Mets fans.
They don't pick on the Twins. They don't pick on the Mets. Well, I guess sometimes Mets you got to punch down a little bit. It's the evil thing. It drives me crazy. The one example I look back to that gave me hope that it was Senator McCain when he was running for president and had the person at his rally ask a question and accused Obama of being Senator Obama of being a Muslim, a terrorist. I had all of these evil words, and Senator McCain interrupted her and says, "No, ma'am, that's not true. I know Senator Obama. He's, I disagree, but he is a family man. He's this." To have had that in real time, to have the politician, the candidate, step up and say, "Again, we can disagree, but that they are a good human being that just have a different belief."
I remember
those days are the good old days.
Right after that disastrous debate performance for Joe Biden, there was a lot of people kind of doing side by sides of previous presidential debates. And there was one, and it was Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. And it was remarkable. They were complimenting each other. I mean, obviously they sharply disagreed. They were in the heat of a presidential race, but I mean, they said nice things about each other's family. They said nice things about each other. They were very genial with one another. And then they cut over to these two, geriatric toads arguing about their golf scores. And it's just such a shift. Like, I want that. We can do better than this. But there is so much hate out there. And even just the amount that I get from people who I consider to be friends. And I look at some of the things they write about me on Facebook now because I'm not going to be in the Trump movement. And they resent that. And they write terrible things about people that I know, people who've been to my home, just writing terrible things about me now. And we've got to get past that. We've got to get past that where I'm allowed. I really hate, and I'm looking at this from the perspective of being a Republican. I hate that Republicans have gotten to a point where you have to like this candidate or you can't be a part of our movement. And you have to like this president that the U.S. Supreme Court has said now has unlimited executive authority. And we in the quote unquote limited government movement have to line up behind that. There's no room for dissent here anymore. That's what bothers me.
And there has to be room on the other side of this where we're allowing space for people to not dislike a candidate. Because I catch myself when I hear some of my moderate Republican friends that will, in 2020 when they voted for Trump, and I hear this, and there was a knee-jerk reaction of, really? Why? It was a little surprise when I knew that they didn't agree with him. They didn't like him, and they're voting in a state that was going to vote for him anyway. So it's not as though that vote was going to make a major difference. And I don't know really what I was expecting, but in those moments I was a little disappointed. And I realized that I need to even check myself there, that we need to, allow room for that grace and recognize that people have other interests. And I don't know. You're exactly right that we have to recognize differences without seeing red, without just seeing evil, and not, getting, expecting full support without dissent. And if you're not with us, you're against us. We have to get past that. It's one of the reasons I'm not running for re-election, is because in Bismarck, we can work. But once you bring that home, it's amazing how the voters, the people, the neighbors, the people that are watching the cable news and this and that, and they're getting their information from a single source, and they're amping up the partisan rhetoric, it gets to be difficult to have that conversation that I'm working on this with a Republican legislator without them looking at me saying, how could you work with somebody so evil? No. We've got that. What? What do you mean? And those conversations were happening too often. And I know that it happens across the state. It's unhealthy. And I'm one of many that are choosing to step away and not run because of how that tone has become. You're seeing it in North Dakota, you see it across the country. And that we're going to see, not that I'm necessarily part of this, but I mean, you're going to see a lot of really good, capable policymakers say that they would rather do something else. They'd rather be engaged in other ways instead of picking fights where you have to pass partisan litmus tests in order to be in.
Well, we need to wrap it up. But I mean, I'll tell you, over the years, a lot of people have come up to me and I, they wanted to pay me a compliment. They enjoy my work and they'll say, "You're the only place where I get my news." And my response is invariably, "Crying out loud, don't do that." And this is against my self-interest, right? Like, it's great. I mean, if they really feel that way and they're that engaged with my work and everything, that's great for me, right? But please don't do that. Please expand your mind a little bit. I mean, please try to take in. I read, I'm a subscriber to the New Yorker. I'm a subscriber to the New York Times. I'm trying to understand how the left views us, and the world's a complicated place. And if you have concluded that there's only one worldview that's going to work, only one philosophy that's going to work in all instances, then you are being myopic. This is not a wise thing. Broaden your mind a little bit, experience some other things. We got to go. Thank you so much for listening. Corey, thanks for sitting in.
Of course, yeah. Let's. I'm actually starting a fund here to send. Chad is so overworked, and the guy never gets to go on vacation. I want to start a GoFundMe where we can get that guy out on some much needed vacation time,
oh my God,
and then I would be happy to step in while he's getting some good R&R.
It wouldn't cost that much money. The man thinks a good big Winnipeg. He's in Winnipeg.
That was, right? By the way, and now you're talking to a guy from Grand Forks. The closest major metro to Grand Forks is Winnipeg. And then the whole time I'm sitting here nodding along going, oh yeah, the Forks are amazing. You go there in the summer, the winter, it's beautiful. And it definitely is a regional bias. It's hard for most people to think that Winnipeg is the destination of a working class family in the upper Midwest.
I think Winnipeg's a great place. One of my favorite.
It is a fantastic city, by the way.
It is. I'm sure. I haven't been there in a long time, but the one time I was there, a couple times just driving through, but not running down Winnipeg. I will say there's a great song out there by the Weaker Thans called "One Fine City" about Winnipeg. And it's kind of funny. I think they're from Winnipeg, and it's not very... It makes you think that nobody can hate a city like the people who live there. It's a great
grass
song.
Is always greener. I think there's a few of those bands that are Canadian-based that just pick on either Canada, their province of that. I think Arrogant Worms, Three Trolls in a Bag, or something like that. There's some Canadian bands that have... One
great city. It's a good song. I like that song. It's one of my favorites. All right, we really do have to...
We get going, and if God willing, if Chad is able to to piece together another vacation, I look forward to our next chat. But yeah, well, it's at least, and I should also point out, you did introduce me at the beginning of the podcast, which is also a very welcome change from what normally occurs. Chad, we missed you.